Hello, and thank you for joining us on today's webcast, Truck Company Do's and Don'ts with Jonathan Hall. My name is Peter Matthews. I'm the editor of Firehouse.com, and I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today. This webcast was developed on the basis that everyone on the fire ground, whether it's a victim trapped inside or the engine company firefighters making the push, rely on truck companies and their large number of tasks to be accomplished before things become under control. Even if your department does not operate a true truck, meaning one with an aerial ladder atop it, these tasks need to be completed to stop the fire from spreading and bring it under control. Today's presenter is Jonathan Hall, and I'd like to thank him for putting this program together for us. Jonathan has been in the fire service for 12 years, and he is currently a firefighter with the St. Paul, Minnesota Fire Department, and he is currently detailed to the training division as a lead instructor for the Recruit Academy. He frequently teaches company level training to the members of the department, including rapid intervention, forcible entry, and high-rise operations. In addition, he is one of the lead instructors for the department's truck company operations apprenticeship program. Prior to joining St. Paul, Jonathan served as a firefighter and training and safety officer for the Township Fire Department in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Jonathan is also a certified fire instructor teaching for a variety of technical colleges throughout Minnesota and here in Wisconsin. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's program, and that's Scott Safety. Today's training is being brought to you by Scott Safety, and for more than 50 years, the Scott Safety Air Pack has been the most trusted SCBA on the market. The Air Pack has had safety features beyond NFPA requirements to provide confidence in any environment. Scott has now launched a breakthrough in SCBA technology, the 5.5 Air Pack. Scott is the exclusive provider of the 5,500 PSI cylinders, providing a significant reduction in both weight and profile versus the traditional 4,500 PSI systems. And just like every Scott pack, the Scott 5.5 Air Pack is made in the USA. During the presentation, please feel free to use your webcast browser to submit any questions to John, and we'll take time to answer them during our 2 breaks. Without any further delay, it is my great pleasure to introduce and welcome Jonathan Hall.
Thanks, Peter. Real quickly, I'd just like to thank everybody from Firehouse.com and Scott Safety for this great opportunity, and obviously thanks to everybody out there for tuning in today. Like Peter said, lots of people are wondering about truck company operations, and they're always concerned that we don't have a true truck company that we're dealing with. Well, the fact of the matter is, no matter where you are, truck company operations are still performed. Whether it's doing searches, forcible entry, doing ventilation, engine companies, rescue companies, squad companies all over the country perform those tasks every day. So we're always concerned about the topics that we're going to cover today, whether it's you as an engine company firefighter or you on a true truck company performing those tasks. We have a lot of topics to discuss today, from knowing your district and your equipment to actual training and assignments to tasks on the fire ground. All those tasks are critical. We have a lot to cover with all these topics, and so without further delay, we'll just jump right into them. Any of these topics, we can be doing a full webcast on those alone, let alone these individual topics as a group. So first and foremost, it's important that you know your response district. One of the most critical components of your truck work is knowing what you're going to be dealing with. It's critical that we know our streets that we're responding to, any building construction issues that we have. What's our standard building that we're dealing with in our district? Is it a multiple dwelling? Is it a high-rise? Is it a ranch or a rambler? Do we have any problem buildings that we're concerned about? Whether it's a vacant building or buildings under demolition or something like that. How about the security levels? Any forcible entry, anything that we have as far as window bars, roll downs, high security levels in the area that we're dealing with, as well as any laddering issues we have. Sometimes it's a lot tougher to get the aerial device up on some of the streets we're dealing with, or is it tougher to get our ground ladders up because we have close exposures? First thing we're going to talk about is the streets. Do we have access issues? Certain streets you can't make the turn onto with a truck company. Do we have low overpasses that we can't get there? Those are always issues that we're concerned about. How about weight restrictions on bridges? Do we have bridges that we're going to be responding to that all of a sudden we're having issues with and we can't make it over? are certain buildings that can't be accessed on their address side. Some of our buildings in the city of St. Paul, I know, it comes in as an address on a certain street, but in fact you can't gain access to that building unless you go around the block. How about road construction? Road construction can change day by day. I know in the city right now, in the city of St. Paul, we're in the process of putting the light rail system in. That's going to connect Minneapolis with St. Paul. Right now it seems like half the city you can't get to due to the construction, and it changes hour by hour on what's open and what's not. Any major events that we have going on, whether it's parades, concerts, sporting events, recently in the city of St. Paul, we just had the Twin Cities Marathon that runs right through the city itself. That cut off most of the city, and we weren't able to respond to a lot of runs in their traditional fashion. We had to have other companies cover those areas just because they couldn't get through for our normal assignments. What about any narrow streets? Parked cars are always an issue. We have tight streets here in the city. Cars parked on both sides. It's not just for getting down them, but if we get down the street, can we get our outriggers placed? Can we get the aerial device up without the outriggers out? Can we short jack our trucks? Those are all things we need to know. Any snow in the city in Minneapolis here in St. Paul and in the upper Midwest, we always get a lot of snow in the wintertime. It always makes it difficult getting down the streets. It makes it difficult getting the runs, and it makes it much narrower for these cars that are parked on the side. So we have to worry about that. Can we make it down the streets? If we can't make it down the streets, what are we going to have to do? How about other companies responding to the scene? Are we going to have to worry about them responding into an intersection? It's always a concern responding into an intersection and possibly, coming into contact with cars or dealing with cars that aren't paying attention. But it's a lot worse if we have any apparatus that are responding, and next thing you know, we're involved in an accident. That's something that we don't want to do. So knowing where your companies are responding from, having your companies leave plenty of room for you out in front to ensure that you can get the aerial device out. Some companies may block access from a certain direction. Knowing which way they will be responding into that particular address can let you know that maybe you should approach from a different direction, so you might have room to actually put the stick up. And then obviously the snow conditions. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It's a lot rougher to get to the scene. It takes a lot more time. It's a lot more hazardous for responding, and it makes the streets a lot narrower. So first thing we need to really worry about is not planning on our usual routes to get us there. In the back of your head, you always have something planned out, and that's always a concern. So make sure that you have a different route planned out in your head as you go. The next thing we'll talk about is when our building construction is in the area. What type of construction is it? Is it an ordinary construction? Is it a type 5 wood frame? If we have wood frame homes, is it a balloon frame construction? In the city of St. Paul, we have tons of balloon framed homes. It's pretty much a guarantee that any house fire we're dealing with in the city is going to be a balloon frame construction. Do we have any newer frame constructions in the city? In newer construction, we have a lot more concerns as far as being able to handle a fire load, the pre-manufactured truss construction with gusset plates, or the newer methods where they're actually gluing them together with tongue and groove. There's a lot of concerns for us as far as actually being able to handle a fire load. And with all these newer homes, so obviously we're concerned about the energy conservation. That's a big push in the building industry now. It's holding all the heat in a lot more. So having that that knowledge of what we're dealing with in these tighter homes and these lightweight constructions are a concern. Renovation. Do we have any older buildings, heavy timber construction, ordinary construction, that now they've added lightweight components to it? In the city of St. Paul right now, down in our lower town area, we have a lot of these old warehouses and manufacturing facilities that are being converted to lofts and apartments. Within those, now we have all sorts of lightweight construction. They're dropping the ceiling levels down for concerns of energy efficiency. And so we're now having all these lightweight construction added into these older buildings. So don't trust the outward appearance of the building. If you look at the photo on the right there, that's an old balloon frame construction. They had a fire in there that actually burned the roof off of it. and they're now putting the lightweight construction of pre-manufactured trusses up there. So you may pull up and think it's a lightweight construction, a balloon frame construction, older construction, true rafter designs, but in fact it's got a lightweight truss design in the roof. All right, the next slide. Standard buildings. Do we have any standard buildings out there? Do we have similar constructions in the area? You know, we have an area of Frogtown in the city of St. Paul that we have a lot of 2.5-story buildings. They're basically the same as you go down the street. They have very similar layouts as far as where the stairs are located, how you get to the upper levels, where the basement stairs are, where the bedrooms are, where our kitchens are. Being in one of these buildings lets you know where a lot of the other things are if you have a fire in a similar building. We have similar heights of the buildings in our area. That tells us a lot for our ladder company operations as far as which ladders to grab. You know, the next time you're out on a run, you have a fire or something, start counting the number of rungs that you have to raise the ladder in order to get to the proper height. That'll tell you a lot when you go to raise the next time at another fire. It's the same number of rungs that you have to raise up. It eliminates a lot of the guesswork that you're having to deal with. Do we have similar access as far as getting into the building itself? Are the doors the same? Are the stairs the same? If we have duplexes, you know, these homes are divided up into duplexes or triplexes. Do we have similar layouts as far as if they're side-by-sides or over-under style designs? The side of homes, do we have a lot of space between them or not? The rear yards, can we get to the rear yard? Do we have to go through an alley to get to the rear yard? Anytime we're out going on any run, whether it's an EMS run, a CO run, or an actual fire, take the opportunity to get into the buildings and get an idea on where everything is located in your standard buildings. On the next slide, we have a problem buildings in our area, buildings that present unique challenges or risks to members during an operation. Whether it's getting out there for company inspections, if your department does that, you're doing pre-planning or code enforcement, it's a great chance to make note of these problem buildings. Or if the city does inspections like they do in the city of St. Paul, or safety and health inspections, or Department of Safety Inspections does all the fire inspections in the city. They see something that's a specific risk to firefighters, whether it's a concern of the actual construction of the building or something starting to fail or holes in the floors or whatever they are, they need to pass that along to us. And once they do, our department sends out information bulletins on the problem buildings that go out to every company so we know. And if that's the case and that's in your district, it's a great idea to get out and actually take a look at those buildings, find out what's going on, kind of get a pre-plan for what happens if we have a fire there. What are we going to do? Are we going to be defensive right away? Are we going to be an offensive attack? If so, what do we need to do to minimize those risks? Does your city have a placarded building design? In the city of St. Paul, we have registered vacant buildings that have a big blue box on the front of the building. They're supposed to have a big piece of paper that says a registered vacant building. They also have condemned buildings. Condemned doesn't necessarily mean that there's holes in floors. It can be infestations or anything like that. But taking a note of that as you approach the scene is a great thing. Where are our vacant buildings? Are they truly vacant? We have a lot of vacants that they pry boards off. And if they pry boards up, are people inside? If the gas and the power shut off and we have a fire in there, there might be a good chance that somebody's inside. So like I said, make sure as you're getting out there on EMS runs or CO runs to take a look at these buildings, take a look at your district as you're going and driving around, and get a good size up as to what's going on in your area. It'll help you out tenfold when it comes time to a fire. Security levels. Do we have forcible entry challenges? Do we have well-secured buildings? Do we have roll-downs? Do we have buildings with window bars? Do we have common methods to secure the buildings in our area? You know, similar locks equals similar methods to defeat them. Oftentimes, buildings in the same neighborhood have similar security levels. Getting out there and getting a chance to look at these different locks that are in buildings, looking at the different locks that might be in the alleys to secure these backs of commercial buildings is a great chance to, you know, you see one, you might be able to have an idea on what you're dealing with when you pull up on a fire right away. Laddering issues. You know, we talked about the narrow streets already, knowing your streets. Can we get the street or rigs down the streets? Can we get the outriggers placed? Do we have parked cars? Again, can we get the rig down the streets? Overhead wires. We have a lot of overhead wires in the city of St. Paul, especially in our alleys. Can we get the aerial up? If we can't get the aerial up, can we get ground ladders up? Can we do beam raises on our ground ladders to ensure that we have the ladder properly, or the building properly laddered? Do we have overhead tree canopies? Can we get up the aerial? The small branches are really no match to the aerial device, so don't let that deter you from getting the stick up. Do we have other companies blocking the front of the building or other access points? You know, this becomes a huge training issue that we can try to work on in the department, is to ensure that we have good access for our trucks in the front of the building. You know, engines can always stretch more lines, but we can't stretch our stick. So any of those above problems, we shouldn't allow them to prevent us from laddering the building. There's always some method of laddering it, whether it's the aerial or using ground ladders or anything like that. We should always have ladders up to the building. The next section we're going to talk about is knowing your equipment. It's critical that all members know and are proficient at their equipment. You know, oftentimes you get issued a piece of equipment, it goes on the rig, and nothing gets done about it. You don't train on it, you check it maybe once or twice, and that's it. So, do we know our PPE? Do we know our life safety equipment? How are our hand tools? Do we know what we have? Are they in good shape? Do we know our power tools? Do we know what our ground ladders are? Which ground ladders we have on our rigs? Which ground ladders we're going to throw? Do we know how to operate our aerial device proficiently? You know, from the outriggers to the actual aerial device, or if we have a tower ladder or an aerial platform, do we know how to operate those up in the bucket? And then also knowing where each piece of equipment is on our apparatus. You know, you shouldn't be running around the rig in the middle of the night looking for a certain tool if you need to get it. You should know right where it is. Knowing your equipment means checking each piece. You know, at the start of each shift or your equipment check night, you should be checking each piece of equipment. You should be proficient at each piece of equipment. Train on each piece. Know how to troubleshoot each piece. You know, if the saw doesn't start, how are we going to troubleshoot that? We should be maintaining each piece. You know, the tool should always be in a ready state, whether it's a hand tool or it's a power tool. They should always be ready to go. We should be taking pride in each piece. I'm a big fan of the word pride. Well-maintained tools work better and show your company pride. You know, you can tell a lot by a company just by walking in the door and looking at their hand tools. Are they rusty? Are they in poor shape? That tells you a lot about the company if they take pride in their equipment. We should know our PPE. That includes our turnout gear, our SCBAs, our radios, and our lights. And we shouldn't become complacent about checking each piece. You know, I come in the morning and I take the other guy's gear off, I put my gear on, I make sure I have all my equipment. I go over my SCBA. I check my radio, I check my lights, I ensure I have everything that I need before I go into the kitchen to start my morning. You know, knowing your turnout gear means knowing how you have it on the rig each time. Is it positioned the same way? Does it go on the same way? Do you have your left and right gloves? Making sure that everything there is critical. Knowing where you have each piece of equipment in your pockets, as far as, you know, your wire cutters. Do you have helmet chocks? Do you have extra chocks in your pocket? Keeping those things the same makes it a big difference when it comes to emergency use and having to get your wire cutters out or webbing to drag a firefighter or something like that. If you keep changing them around or adding things, you'll never know where it is. So keep that consistent. Knowing your SCBA. You know, check it in the morning. Is it full? What is your policy on if it's when you should fill it? Ours is if it's below 3,400, you should be filling it. Knowing your regulator, knowing the bypass or the purge, knowing how that works. Checking the HUD in the morning. Checking your straps. How do they loosen? How do they tighten? If you need to take your SCBA off, do you know how to do it with gloves on, blindfold? Knowing where your URC is in the back on the left side is critical. Check all those things out right away in the morning. Should know your radio, should know your channel layout. Make sure it's charged properly, everything's ready. What are your emergency procedures? Can you operate your radio with gloves on? How the frequencies are radio talk groups laid out on each talk group? Do you have dispatch on 1 and an emergency channel on 16? Knowing all those things is critical in case you get into an emergency on the scene of a fire. Knowing your other life safety equipment. Checking your thermal imaging cameras in the morning. Checking your RIT packs. If you have life safety rope on the rig, check that out, inspect it, make sure it's clean and ready to go. Make sure everything's ready in case you catch a run right away. Knowing your hand tools. You know, we have a variety of hand tools that we use on truck companies, anywhere from axe and Halligans to pipe pulls and hooks, lobster tools, lock pulling tools, making sure all those are in good shape, not rusty, the edges are clean. They're not going to have handles that crack or break on us. You know, we should be maintaining them. Don't allow the tools to be in poor condition. If you look at the axe on the left, it's a training axe that we use for our forcible entry sessions. It's mushroomed out. Now, if that was on a company, it should be uniform. It should be cleaned up. So if you strike something, it doesn't have the tendency to roll off on the edge of it. So make sure your tools are in good shape. Take pride in them. We should be knowing our power tools, whether it's our saws, extrication tools, fans, generators, or whatever we have on the rig. We should be checking them out each morning. Don't assume that the power tools are going to start just because it started the last day you worked. No, they will. Start them out each morning. Make sure they're fueled up. You know, the company the day before might have used them and not told you anything. So make sure they start. If they don't start, know how to troubleshoot them. We should be maintaining them as well. Don't let them be in poor condition. If we use them on a fire scene, make sure we clean them properly. Know your manufacturer's recommendations and what your department requires of you to clean your power tools. We should be knowing where our ground ladders are, each length, where they're stored. We shouldn't have to pull them out each time to check of which one we're at. We should know that the 24-foot's here, the 35-foot's here. Know that they function properly. Inspect them and clean them. Make sure they can be easily removed. I've seen a lot of places where they have, you know, brooms or shovels or something shoved in the ladder rack compartment, and you can't get the ladder out without having to remove the tools. So make sure they can be pulled out easily. And which ladders do we commonly use in our district? Make sure you know where those are. We should always know our aerial operations, what the space is that's needed to set them up, how the outriggers operate, how the ladders operate. You know, our policy in the city of St. Paul is we always have to use the outrigger plates. Do we know where they are positioned so we don't have to keep rearranging them, going back, putting the outrigger out, going and sliding the pad up? You know, we should know exactly where they are. Do we know that we have enough clearance? You know, on the E1 aerial on the right picture there, if I can open my rear door, I know I have enough room to set out my outrigger. On the Pierce on the left there, I know if I put a 6-foot hook down, I have enough room to set out my aerial device. So knowing where those pads go and knowing how much room we need is critical. Knowing the ladder operations. You know, we all practice on knowing the controls, but we should be able to do them blindfolded. If we're up in the bucket and for whatever reason we have heavy fire conditions and we need to operate it from the bucket, can we do it in a low position, just reaching up and controlling it? You know, cross-train everybody to ensure that our engine company people know how to operate the ladder as well in case we have an emergency and they need to go get us out of the window or whatever it is. Everybody should be proficient at running the ladder. Training is a huge thing with anything in the fire service, especially ladder company operations. You know, it can take many forms. Everybody thinks it's got to be a big formalized training. In fact, it doesn't. You know, it can range from the fire academy to training at home. The fire academy, we gain basic skills. We have great hands-on training in a controlled environment. You know, I like to say this is where it all begins. But the key is that we have to instill in them is don't ever stop learning and perfecting your skills. Just because you made it through the academy doesn't mean you're a firefighter on the street that knows everything. There's always something to learn as you go through your career. So ensure that you're keeping on learning every day. How about company training? In-house, training on the equipment that we have on the rig, training on our SOPs. Do we have new SOPs that are out there? New department bulletins. Going around in our district, familiarizing ourselves with our district and the buildings that we have there. You know, we can all put our aerial device up in a parking lot, but have you trained on practicing and putting it up in different buildings in your district? It's a great chance to go out and do that. You know, maybe involve neighboring companies. Formalized department training, multiple companies at the training center. You know, multi-company operations, fire attacks, whatever it is. We're fortunate enough in the city of St. Paul to have a few business partnerships, one of which is Rock 10. We have a great facility out there for RIT training, and we just got the Ford plant that we did forcible entry training in. We're also fortunate enough to have a lot of vacant buildings in the city that are going to be torn down that we can get out and do truck company operations, overhaul, cutting on the roofs, things like that. You know, go through different avenues to see if there's different places you can do training at. On the fire ground, you know, we should always be talking about our tactics. Go ahead and rehash your operation. Talk to each member. See what they did. See what they saw. Talk about anything odd that you found on the fire ground or any challenging things. You know, this door was really tough. I didn't have a lot of room to swing the axe to hit the halligan. Maybe do a full critique of all the companies involved. The big thing is don't be afraid to talk about what went wrong. A lot of places you go, they do critiques, and next thing you know, they're talking about everything went great, when in fact it didn't. So don't be afraid to talk about what went wrong on the fire ground. At the kitchen table, you know, information passed along from other shifts in the morning. Maybe they had a fire, maybe a certain piece of equipment's not working properly. Talking to the senior guys, gaining experience through that, through fire stories. You know, fire stories always are fun to listen to, but there's a lot to learn from them. Critiques on incidents that we might have gone to, and also the traditions of the fire service, and particularly the fire department, that gets passed along to the younger generation. At home, you can always read Firehouse magazines or any of the magazines out there. Different websites you can go to. Obviously, webcasts like this are great. YouTube provides a great training source. There's a lot of poor training videos out there. There's also a lot of really good ones. Watching fire videos, seeing how other places did it, critiquing what might have you done differently if you were on that scene. Don't rely on somebody else to train you. Take the initiative to better yourself. And then, of course, we always have the training conferences. You know, Firehouse has Firehouse World and Firehouse Expo. That'd be a great place to go and learn from guys from across the country. Also, going out afterwards, and it's a great place to socialize and make a lot of point of contacts throughout the country and learn from them. The next thing we're going to talk about is assignments. I'm big into assignments. It's kind of tough to do for some of the smaller volunteer departments. Everybody gets the mindset that we have to have writing assignments, that they have to be set all the time. In fact, that's not the case. You know, our assignments, our goal is to help ensure that all truck company functions are completed. It's a lot to be done, and to make sure that everything's done is important. They help ensure accountability of the truck company. You know, if we have an inside team, where the inside team is. The outside team's on the roof, I know that. Helps coordinate the fire attack with the ventilation on the outside. Our interior team can tell the outside team to take the windows or open up the roof. That's a great way to coordinate it. You know, our inside team would be two firefighters, an officer and a firefighter. They perform forcible entry of the searches if they can. They'll confine the fire and they'll check for extension. You know, the typical tools they have is a halligan, or a set of irons, a hook, a saw, a thermal imaging camera, and hand lights. Our outside team is typically a driver and a firefighter. Aerial ladder setup, ground ladder placement, ventilation, utility control, and then they can join inside to check for extension. You know, a set of irons is always a good thing. A hook, thermal imaging camera, hand lights. The key is, whatever your assignment is, however you do it, whether you have seat assignments, that this is what my task is, or you have actual true writing assignments, you need to know what your assignment is. You should have all your PPE ready. You should have all the necessary tools to carry out your assignment ready. And you should always bring them with you when you get off the rig. Don't get in the habit of not bringing tools with you on an alarm. Just because it's a fire alarm doesn't mean you won't have a fire when you get up there. Our next section is size up. Size up is critical with any fire department task, especially truck company ops. We have a lot of things we do, and we affect the fire in a lot of different ways. so it's important that we size up the scene properly. You know, I'm a big fan of saying size up begins on the way to work. On the way to the firehouse, I'm thinking about a lot of different things. You know, when we get dispatched, when we approach the scene, when we get on scene, and then throughout the incident. When I'm on my way to work in the morning, I'm always looking at the weather conditions. Do we have wind conditions that might affect the wind-driven fires? Do we have heavy snow? Things like that might affect the traffic conditions. I talked about the light rail system going in before. Our traffic conditions and our road constructions change day by day. It's important that we know what's going on and how we're going to get to our areas in our district. Or do we have any major events going on, any sporting events or concerts, anything like that that might affect how we get to the fire scene? Via dispatch, you know, what our report is. Do we have a report of a dwelling fire with people trapped? Do we have smoke or fire coming in? What is it that we're getting the call for? What the occupancy is. We're lucky enough in the city to have our dispatchers tell us usually if it's a commercial building or if it's a private dwelling or something like that. We know that ahead of time. Or knowing the area that you're responding to is important. Do we have multiple calls? You know, if I hear that we have multiple calls reporting fire, it's a pretty good chance that we're going to work once we get there. What the time of day is. You know, we always talk about the occupancy and the time of day. 2 o'clock in the morning in a residential home, it's probably a pretty good chance that we have somebody inside versus 2 o'clock in the morning in a commercial building or an office building, something like that. People probably aren't in there. Again, we're talking about our standard buildings. I know if I get dispatched to a certain address, what the typical building is in that area. And then also what other companies are saying. Do we have other companies that are first in? What the reports are. Do we have need for ventilation? Do we have people trapped? All those things listen to before you get on the rig or as you respond to the scene. As we approach the scene, do we have smoke or fire visible? Do we have any access issues that we talked about earlier? Can we raise the aerial up if we have to? We talked about all those concerns about not being able to raise the aerial. If we need to, can we get other ground ladders into place? Do we have to park down the block and haul our equipment in? As we get up to the front of the building, what type of building do we have? What's the building construction? What the height of the building is? The size of the building? You know, that tells me what ladders I need. The size of the building tells me if I might need search ropes if we have a commercial building. What the occupancy is. We talked about searches. Do I have bedrooms on the upstairs that I need to worry about, or is this a, you know, just a commercial building without anybody inside? The building conditions. I talked about the vacant building placards. Pre-planning those buildings, do we have markings that indicate that this building is being torn down? Is it fenced in? Do we have construction materials on scene to tear this building down? Then we look at the fire location extent. Are we going offensive or defensive right away? Where we're going to have to vent. You know, if the fire is on the first floor on a 2.5-story building, is my first concern putting somebody on the roof? Probably not. My searches. You know, do we have bedrooms that we're concerned about? We're searching the area right around the fire right away. Where am I going to search? Where am I going to put my inside team first? And then any obvious life hazards. Do I have somebody hanging out the window? Do I have somebody that might have already jumped? And then forcible entry challenges, window bars, you know, drop bars on the doors, things like that are all things that you can see as you're pulling up to the building and approaching it. In addition, we need to look at points of egress. You know, I'm always concerned about where my doors are, where my windows are, where my ladders are if I have another truck company already on scene. If I'm inside that building and I need to get out, how am I going to get out? What the probable configuration is. Do I have know where my stairs are? Do I know where my bedrooms are? Is this a duplex? Do I have exterior stairs? We talked about those standard buildings. Knowing those will give you all that information. Do I have vehicles in the driveway that might indicate that somebody's home? What about the exposures? Do I have tight exposures? Do we have extension to the building next to us? Do I need to be concerned about searches in those buildings as well? And then do we have sufficient help to accomplish all our truck company tasks? Do I need to have another truck company respond? Those things should be determined right away. The don'ts of size up. We should never just park the rig. We should always position it. Even if we pull up and there's nothing showing, we should always position the rig for use later on. We shouldn't be getting tunnel vision approaching the fire building. Everybody's often running into the building and they're not really taking the time to size up the building, realize where the fire is, realize where our egress points are. I always like to say, don't rely on the officer to perform the size up. Everybody always says, well, the size up's the officer's job. Well, if I'm separated from my crew inside the building and I need to bail out of there, do I know where my windows are? Do I know where my doors are? It's critical that you do your own size up to know what you have. Also, officers miss things. The more sets of eyes looking at the building, the better off you are.
Okay, John, we'll take a quick break here, and we'll take some of your questions. So if you do have any, please send them in, and we'll get to them in just a moment. First, again, I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and also thank Scott Safety for the sponsor of today's webcast. Scott Safety offers a broad portfolio of thermal imaging cameras that meet the needs of any application. The lightweight Eagle Attack combines simple one-button controls with best-in-class durability and image quality, making it an ideal camera for tactical operations and increasing situational awareness. And with a price significantly below previous generation cameras, you can put this critical technology in more hands on the fireground, increasing both safety and performance. Okay, John, we have a bunch of questions that are related to the second half of the program, so we'll probably just take a few now and get to a majority later on. First question that came in, it says, any ideas for effective training for multiple truck companies? Who handles what and when? We have 2 truck companies on the first alarm.
Sure. I mean, that's a great thing that can be covered a lot in your SOPs. A lot of places, they assign the first 2 truck company to the front of the building, the A side, and they might take the A side and the B side. And the second 2 truck company would take the rear of the building, taking side C and side D. Practice throwing multiple ladders. What your assignments are, your riding assignments. Do we put somebody up on the roof, just one person up on the roof to cut the roof? If so, maybe having the second person on that second truck in the roof position to go up there to help them out, be their guide on the roof. It all depends a lot on how you do your SOPs, but there's plenty of things that need to be accomplished. Ensuring those tasks are performed are a great thing.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question comes in from Sean, and it just dropped off my screen. Sorry. It says, I try to use the thermal imaging camera on the side, A and C, on the exterior during size up. Any thoughts on that?
It's a great way to look at the building if possible. Thermal imaging cameras are great to see if you might have some exterior hotspots. It might give you an indication where the fire is, but a lot of these energy-efficient buildings, there's not going to be a lot of signatures from the outside. You might be able to use it real quick to scan the building, the sides of the building, and see if you might have had occupants that jumped and are lying in the yard that might otherwise be missed initially. So those are all great things. If you do see a hot spot, it might be a good place to indicate where you're going to need a vent, where you're going to have to assign crews to, where your fire conditions might be. So it's always a great tool to use. It just depends on how you want to use it. To size up for me, I'm more focused on what my conditions are and where my points of egress are and how I'm going to approach this building as far as attacking the fire and where I'm going to place my guys for ventilation and everything else.
Okay. Next question comes from Wyoming. It says, we're taught to stage with the the apparatus until we have a specific assignment. Do you stage until specific assignments are given? And I think, that could go for both the crew and then, the apparatus. And I know, again, we get to some of this later on, but we can hit that now.
And that's a tough thing with policies as far as if you're staging or not. Obviously, if we have fire conditions as we pull up on scene, I don't think the truck should be staging. They should be trying to position the rig in the best possible place right away. If we stage them down the block until we give them assignments later on, typically the front of the building's then blocked and we can't use the aerial device. So, try to follow what your chiefs are going to tell you to do, but when it comes down to it, at a working fire, there's so much that needs to be done for the truck company right away, especially if you're only operating one truck and you're light on staffing. As far as forcible entry and ventilation, if we can't get up there and force the door, the crews aren't going to get inside. The searches need to be done. If we can confine the fire and, communicate that to the engine company, great. So staging is important if we have a large operation or it's maybe just we're investigating what's going on, but always try to get that rig in the best position possible right away.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead into the second part, because the majority of the questions, like I said, that we have are based on the second half. So, again, if you do have any questions, please send them in, and we will get to them as we wrap up the presentation. Thank you.
All right, getting into the second half here, forcible entry. You know, it's one of those things I just said that if we don't get the door forced, we don't get crews inside, the rest of the operations can't start. So being proficient at how we're going to force doors, having our crews good at forcing doors is absolutely paramount. Just a little bit of what we're going to cover in forcible entry, the different types of doors, frames, locks, and things we might encounter. Some size-up concerns, some safety concerns, how we go about forcing doors, approach the different doors, inward and outward opening, and then a little bit on softening the building later on. Our goals of forcible entry are to provide a safe and rapid means of entry into the structure. We want to reduce the number of injuries that are out there. You know, guys like kicking doors, shouldering doors, but that often results in injuries. It looks very unprofessional when we're doing it, causes more damage that needs to occur, and then we also lose the integrity of the door, the control of the door. You know, we need to make sure that we have the integrity of the door in case we need to close it. You know, the big buzzword in the fire service a lot right now is wind-driven fires. If we kick the door open and we have a wind-driven fire condition, which can occur in residential homes, you know, do we have a blowtorch coming out in the front yard? No. And then also we need to remember it's not just a safe means of entry into the structure, it's also a means of egress for our crews operating on the inside. So we need to go around and force a door to be able to have them exit easily. We need to clear the doorway all the way. We don't want any obstructions to remain in the doorway. This is the fire, one of the fires we had in the city of St. Paul back in January of this year, I believe. It was a top floor fire in a two-story commercial building. It was fire up in the cock loft that came in as a fire alarm. They got there and there was heavy smoke visible. The crews decided to take the glass on the door. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but we eventually had a couple lines stretched through there, and we had a bunch of companies operating on the top floor. If something changed up there and we needed to get down in a hurry, how easy is it going to be to get, you know, 3 or 4 crews down the stairs that are behind that door and out that door? They're going to be, you know, having to duck and turn and pivot to try to get out. If we needed to get out in a hurry, that's not how we want to have it. So make sure we're clearing the doorway of obstructions all the way. We want to maintain the integrity of the door. The last thing we want to do is have the door completely ripped off its hinges or crumpled a bunch of metal. If we need to close that door for whatever reason, we have a line that fails on it, or, you know, wind-driven fire conditions or something like that, especially in an apartment building in a common hallway. If we need to close that door to try to confine the fire, now we can't do it. Now somebody's stuck there trying to hold that door up against the doorway. Just a little bit on the types of doors that we have out there. Obviously, we have a bunch of wood doors, hollow cores typically found in the interior buildings. Solid cores are filled. You might find them on apartment doors, residential front doors, things like that. Metal doors, we can have them hollow core, solid core. You know, they are often filled with a foam insulation or fire retardant material or wood. Then we also have tubular aluminum doors, like located on the one in the picture on the right. It's a tubular aluminum outside with a glass center. You know, what type of locks do we typically have on these doors? And then obviously we can have glass doors that are solid glass doors. Hardware is mounted right through it. Typically are locked down at the bottom. If we have a door like that, you might be able to force it easily enough just by getting a tool in there and gently prying up. The lock's right in the bottom, and it might lift right out of the threshold. The types of frames out there, different wood frames that we have. A stop frame is typically found on your interior door. It's the one that's there nailed up there. If you try to pry against that stop, you're just going to rip the stop off. The rabbited style doors are like the ones found on your front door. They're milled that way from the manufacturer, so it's one piece. And then with metal frames, we can have them be filled with concrete. If we have a solid metal door and a metal-filled frame, forcible entry is really tough on those doors. It's a very formidable opponent. What are the types of locks that we have out there? You know, we have a bunch more than what are listed here, but these are some of the common ones. The key in the knob style is very common in residential and commercial buildings. That's your typical front door lock. Tubular deadbolts, they come in a variety of throw sizes. They're trying to beef those up a lot more. Some of these doors are now having 4, 5, 6 of them in the door. Rim locks. Rim locks are mounted on the exterior side, inside of the door, on the exterior of the paneling of the door itself. And what those are is it's a supplementary lock. You know, oftentimes there's where in apartments or on older homes where they just had a key in the knob style lock and they added the rim lock. It was a lot easier than actually boring through the door to put a deadbolt in. The mortise style locks, you know, common in commercial buildings, some of the older interior wood doors. It's actually a pocket in the door where the lock's placed. Sometimes those are just latches. Oftentimes they're a latch deadbolt combination. And then the pivoting deadbolts, very common in those tubular aluminum doors on a commercial storefront. It's a lock, a deadbolt that's flush in the door and it pivots upwards into the frame. They can also have a variety called a J-hook, where there's an actual notch cut out that pivots up and locks into a pin that's in the frame. Those are very tough locks to actually force without breaking the glass out of the door, and if we do that, we lose the integrity of the door. Some of the supplemental locks that we have out there, drop bars. Very common in the rear of buildings, commercial buildings. Oftentimes on an outward opening door, they'll have those telltale bolt heads on the sides of the door, indicating that we have the drop bar hardware on the back. Slide bolts. The typical slide bolt, you might find them on your fences or sheds. Oftentimes people will put those as supplementary locks. There's usually not any telltale signs from the outside that they're slide bolts, but they can be mounts on the outside. They might add a deadbolt, or not, excuse me, a padlock to it to try to beef up the security. And we have chains or door limiters, you know, common in apartment buildings and hotels. Apartment buildings and hotels, there's usually only one way in and one way out. If we have somebody on the inside, or if the door limiter is in place or the chain's in place, we probably have a good chance of somebody inside. You know, if we have something like that, how are we going to effectively accomplish forcible entry? You know, might be putting a fork on there and driving those hardware right off the door or the frame. And then finally, angle iron. Angle iron's popping up all over the country. It can be found on outward or inward opening doors. It's usually mounted at the door itself. It tries to put the seam between that door frame and the door itself to prevent somebody from sticking something in there and trying to pry the door open. There's new ones out there that have J channels out there that actually shield the angle iron on the door, and so you can't get anything past that angle iron to try to force it. This is something that you should try to train on if you have it in your area. You know, getting the fork behind that or the adze behind that, prying that away from the frame, and getting the tool in place. You know, go around your district, see what you have out there, find out what you have, and then train on it. Find out ways to overcome it. The types of hinges we have: standard hinge, very common on commercial or residential doors. It's the top two pictures there. They have the pin that joins the two halves together. Usually you can try to remove those pins and open the doorway up, but now they're putting caps on them, so you can't put anything in there to open them up. They might weld that pin in. Some of the newer ones on commercial doors, they're actually putting set screws in the back to keep you from driving that pin out. Self-closing hinges, common in the hotels and in apartment buildings. These like to close behind you. That's what they're designed to do. Make sure you're chocking the style door, especially if you're forcing the entry into it. And then the pin hinge is found on commercial buildings. It's usually at the top and the bottom. There's a receiver mounted onto the door and then the pin on the frame, and they usually go together and latch together. You can't remove the pin on those. So you might have to just actually try to force that off the door or the frame itself. The key with this is don't attack the hinge side first. I talked about it earlier. If we blow the door off the hinges, now somebody's stuck there having to hold that door up against the doorway if something changes. A little bit on size up for forcible entry, pre-arrival and initial arrival. We should try to know the type of occupancy. That will tell us a lot on what type of locks we're having to deal with, what type of tools we might want to bring with us as far as through the lock tools. Are we going to have to bring a forcible entry saw or something like that? Know the type of incident we're responding to. Is it a fire with somebody trapped, or is it a service call? That's going to tell us if we're going to take the time to try to pull the pins on the door, or reduce damage, or if we need to get there quickly if somebody trapped. Any conditions that we have visible on arrival. Do we have heavy smoke or fire conditions? Do we need to get in that area right away? Is it better to attack from down, closer to the seaside or whatever it is? We should know those things and try to force the door closest to the fire as soon as possible. And then any companies on scene and the radio reports. We want to make sure that if we do have crews operating on the inside on a commercial storefront, that we may get around to the backside and force that door in the alley or on the seaside of the building to ensure they have a means of egress if they have to get out. Size up on the door itself. A couple things we're going to look at is we're going to look at the type of door we have. Is it metal or wood? The type of frame, same thing, metal or wood. We think it's filled. And the type of lock. You can size that up as you're walking up to the door itself. Is the door inward opening or outward opening? If it's inward opening, that's typically recessed in the frame, and the hinges aren't visible. If it's outward opening, it's usually flush with the frame, and the hinges are visible. Don't forget to feel the door for heat as you approach it. Even before we check to see if it's locked, if we have fire conditions on the backside, we want to make sure that we have a line in place before we make entry. And then obviously check to see if the door is locked. If it's unlocked, well, our forcible entry problem is solved in this door at least. A little bit on pivoting deadbolts. I talked about them earlier, typically in those tubular aluminum doors. Easy way to tell if you have them is to look and see if there's a door latch handle. On the picture on the left, you can kind of see that latch handle there. That's a good indication that it's just a door latch. You're probably going to be able to get that open without breaking the glass out. You'll have enough play between the frame and the door to do that. The one on the right, there's no latch handle there. That's a good indication it's a pivoting deadbolt. If you try to force that conventionally, there's a good chance you're going to break the glass out. The K tool, the through the lock tool, was designed for this lock just for that reason, because it oftentimes would take the glass out on the door. Key boxes. I don't know how many of you out there have them in your department or your district. We're lucky enough to have a lot of them in the city of St. Paul, but oftentimes we get there and they're in poor shape. We can't get the key and we can't open them up. And if we do, we don't have the right key in there, or there's no keys in there. Maybe a crew was in there before and forgot to put the keys back. So you have to really weigh that. If we have a fire with somebody trapped, am I going to wait to try to get this key box open or screw around with it for a long time trying to get it open, or am I just going to go ahead and force the door? It's going to be up to your captain or your chief to make that call, but don't forget that you might have to do traditional forcible entry, even if there is a key box there. Now we're getting a little bit into the meat and potatoes of forcible entry itself, the body positioning, hand positioning, tool positioning. The body positioning, we're obviously really concerned about safety and making sure that we're not hitting anybody or injuring anybody. So for us, we always have the Halligan firefighter calling the shots, the operation. They're the ones that are at most risk of getting injured, so they'll be standing up, holding the tool, and they'll be calling the shots. The firefighter with the axe is going to go ahead and take a knee. They go ahead and put their targets, their objective right in eyesight. So when they swing on that tool, it's right where they're looking. And then we want to have short striking motions. We don't want to go for that home run swing. We just want to make sure it's a nice, easy striking motion, driving that tool in. When you go back to that grand slam swing, that's when somebody ends up getting hit. Somebody breaks a hand or a wrist. Hand positioning itself is critical. If you look at the firefighter holding the Halligan, he's got an over-under grip on it. His hand's away from the end of the tool, the adz end of the tool, to ensure that for whatever reason the firefighter with the axe misses, it doesn't hit his wrist, or there's less of a chance that there's more distance between that. And then the firefighter with the axe has his hand at least one hand width below the head of the tool. That way, if he swings high on that Halligan, he doesn't crush his knuckles right on that adz end of the tool. We have commands that we always use. The first one's hit. That's one hit on the Halligan by the axe. So the firefighter with the Halligan will call for a hit. The firefighter with the axe will hit it once. The next one is drive it. This is when the tool's not going to be moved anymore. It's in proper position, and we just need to get the distance set properly. The firefighter with the axe is going to be told to drive it, and they're going to hit it continuously until they're told to stop. And then stop means, obviously, that with the firefighter striking the Halligan is supposed to stop. We do what's called a tap-tap-hit method. We make a cross with the axe and the adz. That allows us that if the tool, for whatever reason, goes left or right, up or down, there's a better chance that it's still going to hit the adz of the tool when we're forcing the door with the fork end. The firefighter with the The Halligan will call for a hit, and the axe firefighter will do 2 light taps on the tool and then hit the tool. So what this does is it allows the firefighter that's calling for the hit, the Halligan firefighter, to know not to move the tool, that it's going to hurt if he moves the tool. It also allows in zero visibility or low visibility for the axe firefighter to know that he's lined up on his mark on that Halligan. So those 2 short taps and then dropping back and hitting it, he knows that he's lined up and he's going to make a good clean hit on that tool. A little bit on the forceful entry approach. It's the common one: gap, set, force, and then don't forget to control the door as soon as you're done. A little bit on gapping and different types of doors out there. Gapping an inward opening door. If you look at picture 1, we're inserting the adze of the tool between the door stop and the door itself. The most play we're going to have is towards the upper part of the door or the lower part of the door. The lock right in the middle is going to go ahead and hold that door secure. You can kind of lean with your body weight into the door, your shoulder into the door, trying to increase that gap a little bit to get that tool in. And then we're going to rotate either up or down on the fork end of that tool. You can see it starting in picture 2 there. It starts to rotate down, and then we max out or spread the whole width that adds. Sometimes that might be enough to get the door forced. Sometimes on wood stops, might go ahead and rip that stop off. So you're just going to have to size it up and look at it and try it. Anytime we get a gap, we want to go ahead and chalk that door, hold what we gain. We don't want to lose anything we gained. You might be able to force that door, like I said. The lock might fail enough with that to open up. Gapping an outward opening door. Again, we're going to place the tool between the door and the frame, the adze in there, and we're going to rotate down or up on the fork end of the tool, trying to crush that door down or increase that gap. If you look at the photo on the right there, a lot of the doors, these hollow core doors that are found on exterior buildings, they might be filled with a light foam. They have the skin that's just tack welded there. If you put the Halligan in there and try to crush it down, you'll actually crush the door and you'll break that bead weld down. And then we're going to have to go ahead and try to hit that, strike that enough to go ahead and pull that away from the frame to get the tool back behind there. So obviously try to crush it down. You might be able to get it. If it's a solid door, you might not have a lot of play there. The next step will be setting the tool. This is setting the adze end of the tool on an inward opening door. If you look at photo 1, we had gapped the door. We gained quite a bit there. We chopped it. The next step, if we had a metal door with the metal stop there, or a nice milled stop, one of those rabbited stops, so you could put the tool against there, the adze against there, and pry back. We insert our chock a little more. The ultimate goal is to try to get that adze behind the frame of the door like it is in photo 4. So we'll keep working that tool until we get it back there. Once it's back there, then we can go ahead and force the door. Setting the fork end on an inward opening door. Once we have the gap there, we go ahead and put our tool in. We want to put our tool bevel to the door. Oftentimes people try to put the bevel of the jamb, and it's a lot tougher on that. It's easier to steer it in, but you're not going to get a lot of gain, a lot of spread with that tool. So you get the tool in there, push it in until it goes ahead and hits that frame, and you're going to feel for springiness on the edge of the door. You're going to rotate it out, and that's where you're going to start hitting it in. So then your firefighter with the Halligan's going to call for the hit from the axe firefighter, and they're going to keep moving that tool until it's pretty much perpendicular to the door. They're going to then drive that tool in until that cross of the tool, the cross right between the 2 tines of the forks where they meet, is even with the inside of that stop. You can see we need to have enough of that fork behind the door that when we go ahead and try to force it, we go ahead and force that door easily. Setting the fork on an outward opening door. Again, we gain that gap with the adze end. We put the tool in. This time we're going to go bevel to jam. We put the bevel of the tool to jam. We tap it in maybe until we hit that back stop, and then we start to work the tool towards the frame side of the door. We're trying to wrap that fork around the inside of the door. So you keep going until you're pretty much perpendicular again to the door, and then you go ahead and drive it in until the crotch of the tool this time is the outside of the door. Now that ensures that we have enough of the fork behind the door that when we force the door, it's not going to rock out. We're not going to lose what we gained. Forcing the door now with the adze end of the tool. Once we have the tool set or gapped and set, we're going to force the door. So putting the adze end in behind The actual frame of the door itself, we can either rotate it down, the same method we use to gap the door, or we can go ahead and try to force it in by pushing the tool towards the door itself. Forcing the door with the fork in, again, the tool's set. We're going to go towards the door, push it towards the door, and we're going to try to max out the spread that we could possibly get with the tool by pushing the Halligan all the way until it's flush with the door as it is in photo 2. If we don't have enough spread there to force the door itself, we can drop the back end of the flathead axe behind the Halligan itself, and you can go ahead and use that to gain a little bit of extra spread there. Max the tool out again, and you should be able to get the door. Using the fork on an outward opening door, or the adze on the outward opening door. You have the tool set in there, the fork's behind the door. This time we're going to be pushing towards the frame. So we get the tool in there, we push towards the frame. Outward opening doors, they might be tough. You might have to have your partner stand up and help you work the tool, trying to force that door open. And the other option we have is we get enough of a gap there, enough we can chock it, get the adze behind past the stop behind the door, and pry outwards towards the frame. If we have a wood frame and probably a wood door, one of those stop style frames where the stop's going to pry out, we can do what's called spiking the jam. We can take a baseball style swing, drive the pick of the Halligan right into the door frame, and then we want to pull down and towards our groin to try to force that door open. Usually it's enough. There's not much for security on those types of doors that'll force the door open fairly easily. And then anytime we force the door, we have to control it. So as soon as it opens, we want to have our firefighter with the Halligan drop down, reach in with the adze and the pick end and pull the door closed. If we're sure we have heavy fire conditions, we have high heat back there, we can put the person with the hook on the door, having hook control. Forcible entry team can be up there working, force the door won't even open. We can have it closed there, wait for the engine to get up in position, have the nozzle right in there to drop in the door. You know, this is really critical if we have any wind-driven fire conditions. And then anytime we open a door, we should make sure we chock the door. So we want to chock down low or on the lower hinge. We never want to chock high on the door. The reason for that is if conditions change and we need to close that door, the last thing we want is somebody to have to stand up in that environment to try to pull that chock out. You know, chocks fall out all the time, but as soon as you want it to fall out and you're pulling on that door is the time it's going to get really jammed in there and somebody's going to have to stand up in those high heat conditions to pull it. And with forcible entry, anytime we're operating in a scene, we should try to soften the building. If we have crews operating on the inside and we have window bars, you know, we might want to consider removing those window bars or forcing another door, or opening up a roll-down gate. The picture on the left there is one of the window bars on an apartment building. It's hinged on one side. If you see hinges, it's a great opportunity to go to the other side and ensure that there might just be a latch there that you could twist and it'll open up, as there is in this picture. They might have just a padlock there or a bolt that's through there. Forcing that bolt will open that up instead of having to work the whole door, or maybe cutting it with a saw. Usually you have enough play with the back of an axe or the maul to strike down in the metal and bend it enough to pull them out of the wall anchors if they're not hinged. Going into searches. With any building fire, we have to make sure the searches are done. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, life safety is a priority. We want to ensure that the searches are done even on a small cooking fire, that somebody's not passed down the back room. So we want to make sure that we're doing our searches effectively every time. I always say the three things we're searching for when we're inside is we're searching first and foremost for victims, then we're searching for the fire. If we can find the fire, we're going to try to confine it, pass that information along to command. Makes it a lot easier for the engine company to get the line up and get water on the fire. And then I'm always searching for a means of egress. If I'm in the building, I have my hand on the wall, I'm always feeling up a little higher than normal, trying to feel for any windows. That way, if conditions change, I can go right back to the window and I can get out. If you're searching low, something happens, you need to get out, you're going to have no clue where that window is. You know, we don't want to get tunnel vision as we're searching for the victims. Make sure we're searching for that means of egress, that life safety for us as well. Some of the search tools, we want to make sure we have some sort of hand tool with this Halligan or hook. Thermal imaging cameras are a great aid for us as we're performing searches. And if we're in a large building or you know, some maze-like condition, or maybe even a hoarding house or something like that, we need to make sure that we have search ropes, some way of being able to get back out. We always want to remain oriented when we're searching. We want to keep one hand on the wall in order to do that. On smaller rooms, you might be able to hook a foot or a tool inside the doorway and just sweep inside, often covering the whole room. You can post somebody at the door, maybe an officer or somebody searching down a hallway. You could have one firefighter off to your left, one off to your right, searching a smaller room. But you must be in visual or physical contact or voice contact with them. And then, like I said, I always feel up high as I'm doing a search with my orientation hand looking for any windows. So if I need to get out, I can. The don'ts of orientation and searches. We don't want to toss furniture wildly around. We want to use it as a point of reference. Oftentimes you're inside a house, and next thing you know, somebody's tossing furniture across the room. It might cover up a potential victim. Also, I often use that as a point. I know my window is 4 feet from that couch over there. If I need to get out, I find the couch 4 feet, I'm at my window. I don't want to just focus on victims. We want to monitor conditions, and we're always looking for that means out. So we might all of a sudden have high heat conditions on the upstairs, the floor above the fire. That's something that we should probably pass along to command. We might have some extension in the wall, especially balloon frame construction. So monitor your conditions and look for a way out. And then don't just rely solely on the thermal imaging camera to remain oriented. These thermal imaging cameras are great tools, but like any portable battery-operated electronic device, they can fail. The last thing you want to be is out in the middle of the room, and all of a sudden your camera fails. You have no idea how to get out of the building. On the primary search, the first thing we want to do is ask any bystanders outside about the occupants. They might be the occupants themselves. They might tell you everybody's out. Don't always rely on that. But they might be the neighbor. You have somebody who's inside. Okay, where are they normally inside at? Well, they normally sit in the, towards the back of the building on the first floor in the chair. That might be a great place to start your search, really focusing on that. Oftentimes that's where they're found. The search is quick but thorough. We want to confine the fire if possible. If we locate it, we confine it, we pass that information along to command. First thing we want to do is search around the fire area, then the rest of the fire floor above in a residential home, then the other floors. Obviously, it's a little different when we get into high-rise operations, but first and foremost, fire area, fire floor, floor above. We always want to look for common egress areas. Humans are oftentimes very, they use the same ways to get out. You look at that, they're creatures of habit. They always try to go out the same way that they normally get in. So make sure you're searching those areas, the front door, the back door, hallways, inside windows maybe. But always go search those common areas first. And then a little bit on bedrooms. We want to scan the bedroom with a thermal imaging camera. We want to check for any heat signatures. Somebody that's been laying on a bed for quite a while during the night, or even a short period of time, their heat signature stays on that mattress and that foam for a long time. If somebody's saying that they're not out of the building, you see that heat signature, there's a good chance they're still in that bedroom or right around there. We want to check the egress areas, check the door, check the windows. We want to check the mattress, check on top of it, check around it, check under it. If you find a low mattress, a small low mattress, it might be a good indication that you might have bunk beds. If we find a victim, it's important that we check the bed again for secondary victims. How many people have their kids sleep with them? Baby's having a hard night, goes ahead and crawls in the bed with parents, or there might be a second victim in there. Make sure we're checking that. Don't just find the one and pull them. I'll always go back and check it. A little bit on vent enter search. It's a great tool if we have a report of a viable victim or somebody that's trapped. We're going to go right to that window. It doesn't necessarily have to be up a ladder. We're going to go in, vent that window, vent it high, clear it out, go in and do the search. It's a very calculated thing. This is the best way to get to them and perform a quick search versus going in through the building and trying to get up. Maybe the second floor, making a push up the second floor. Once we get up there, we take that window out, we clear it out, clear the sash, we scan the room with a thermal imaging camera. I like to take the hook that I have with me, poke it through the ceiling, make a quick inspection hole, look for any heavy fire conditions or maybe black fire, any heavy smoke conditions coming out of there, scan that with thermal imaging camera. Just because we have it up there doesn't mean I'm not going to make the search. It just means I need to go a little quicker. I want to check the floor. I'm going to go ahead and sweep the floor to make sure that there's no victims. Then I'm going to sound the floor. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place my tool for orientation, and I'll show you what I like to do in just a second. Then I'm going to enter the window. I'm going to go ahead and make my search, find the door, search the hallway real quick, just poke my head out, make sure there's no victims in the hallway, close the door, finish my search, and exit down the ladder. When I do a search for VES, I always like to position my hook, my orientation tool, right to the ladder itself. This 24-foot ladder, I can put it right in the tip. Otherwise, you can put it on the rung. When I do that, that always gives me my orientation right back to the ladder. So I search right-handed most of the time. It's on the right side of the ladder. I go ahead and make my search to the right, crawl over it. Conditions change. It's usually when I'm in the second half of the room. I can make a hasty retreat back to the ladder. I hit my tool, slide my hands right up it, and the ladder's right in front of me. I can hook my arm and bail out. If you put it in the corner of the window, you know, it has a tendency of also now you hit the tool, it rolls out of there. Or if you need to get out in a hurry, the tool leads to the corner of the window and not to your ladder itself. So try to hook that tool right to your ladder. Secondary searches. These are painstakingly thorough. We want it conducted by a different company to eliminate some of that, oh, I already searched there, everything's fine, and moving on. No, we want to have a different company do it. We want to make sure these are conducted before overhaul operations. You know, having a victim inside a room that's burned up or charred, you start pulling all the insulation down, it's easy enough to mix them. So don't report that the search is complete until you're 100% sure it is. And the last thing you want is to have, you know, your department in the media because you left the scene and now somebody's family found a victim on the second floor. So make sure your searches are complete. When we're doing a search, we always need to communicate with our partner. What do we have? What we're feeling? You know, I think I have a victim over here. I'm going left. You go right. Things like that. Obviously, any conditions that we have inside, we should report to command. Any areas that could not be searched, you know, the primary is complete negative on the fire floor with the exception of the fire room. Let them know so that that search has to be done later on. And then, obviously, anything that we have that we need to communicate to the IC once the search is done, complete negative, make sure they pass that along. Into the section on laddering. Laddering is obviously a huge part of ladder operations. If you're on a truck company, you should be really good at throwing ground ladders in your aerial ladder. We'll talk a little bit about the classes of laddering obstacles, ladder throws, and ladder placement. The two classes of ladders, aerial ladder, they're truck mounted. They can be an aerial platform. It could be a tower ladder. And then the portable ladders. Those are your extension ladders, ground ladders, roof ladders, attic ladders, things like that. Any laddering and safety concerns. We're always looking for overhead wires, any trees that we might have, soft ground, limited space. The key is don't let any of the obstacles keep you from getting ladders thrown. If you can't get that aerial up, get a ground ladder up. There shouldn't be any reason that you're not laddering that building. With overhead wires, anytime we move a ladder, we should always check the overhead. Ground ladder or aerial ladder, we should always be looking up. Raising it, lowering it, whatever it is, it's easy enough to miss those those wires in low visibility, you know, low light conditions, heavy smoke conditions, things like that. Make sure everybody's scanning up for overhead wires. Trees. You know, if we have heavy canopies or thick branches, we might not be able to get the aerial up. But smaller branches, things like that, shouldn't deter you from getting the aerial device up. Those aren't any match for those aerial devices. Just don't be running your aerial into you know, a pretty thick branch or something. Small branches, it's not a problem for them. Any soft ground that we have, you know, our policy is we always put the outrigger plates down in the city of St. Paul, but especially important on soft grounds. If for whatever reason you have to be on soft ground to get the aerial properly positioned, make sure you have those plates out. If you're putting up a ground ladder and it's some soft ground, make sure you jump on that lower run to really sink that ladder right into that ground so it's not going to slip later on when somebody starts to climb it. Limited space concerns. You know, we have a lot of close exposures in the city. Get used to throwing ladders on the beam. Practice on throwing ladders on the beam. There shouldn't be really too many reasons that you can't get a ladder in unless it's a super tight exposure. Same thing knowing your equipment. We talked about it, knowing how much room you need to get those outriggers out. If you have enough room, you're all set. But make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you try that before you sit there and spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time on not being able to get the outriggers out. Carrying tools with ladders. I'm a big fan of single-person ladder throws and ladder carries. I'll talk about that in just a second. But anytime we're going back using a ladder, we should always have tools with us. I talked about carrying a hook and a halligan. The best and easiest way to carry it, to keep your hands open, at least one hand open. You can put the hook right into the tip of the ladder, or the rung of the ladder, and then the halligan can go in one of the ladder rungs with the pick end. If you rotate that halligan, that fork end over onto the The hook itself, it locks it in. It's strong enough that you can pick the whole ladder up. I don't recommend doing it, but it's not going to fall out of there. Then easily rotating it to the side releases both tools once you get to your objective target. As I said, I'm a big fan of single-person ladder throws and ladder carries. The main reason behind that is I can get 2 ladders up in the same amount of time with 2 people versus having 2 people on one ladder and then having to go back to throw another one. When you consider it, the only weight difference is when you're carrying the ladder back to its objective target. Otherwise, once it's back there, one person will typically standing on a rung or standing on a beam, and the other person's doing all the lifting. So this single-person beam raise is done using one of the hooks, a New York roof hook. We get it to our target objective. We'd lay it parallel with the building, right in front of our window or whatever we're going for. We'd put the hook down. We'd stand on that. We'd go ahead and snug that ladder, that butt spur up against that hook, stand on the hook, and we'd go ahead and raise it in the upward position and lean it against the building. A single-person rung raise. This time we're going to butt it up against the building, perpendicular with the building. We'll put our hooks out, our tools out, right up against the building. We'll lay it fly down. Once we lift it up, we'll put it up against the building. We'll pull the butt section out to the proper climbing height. Estimating the climbing angles. If I throw that 6-foot hook down up against the building, typically for a second-story window, I'm right around 6 to 7 feet. It gives me a great estimation on where my ladder is going to have to be placed to get that proper climbing angle. In addition, it keeps my tools right where I need them. So if I do have something where snow conditions or something, I'm not searching around for my tools. It's right up against the building. Using the palm technique to raise the ladder. Once the ladder's in position, if you noticed for that single-person rung raise, I went ahead and positioned it fly down. Normally you'd have to have it fly against the building to raise the halyard. This, you put it up against the building, you push it up with your palm until it's in the proper height. This gives you a great vantage point on the front of the building, or the front of the ladder, so you know exactly where your ladder is being placed. You don't have to guess and then lean it in and turn around, go back and raise it or lower it with the halyard. So don't feel you have to use the halyard. If you're raising it a long distance, absolutely use the halyard. A couple rungs here and there, try to use your palm. As far as ground ladder placement, try to get that tip of the ladder a half rung in the window. That way, if it starts to slide for whatever reason, it hits the window, the frame, and it won't slide off the tip of the building or the side of the building. In addition, that tip's in there. It gives me a rung that I can hold on to to transition in and out of the window. Also, if I'm inside and I need to get out in a hurry, it's something that I can see. It's something that I can feel. If it's by the book and it's below the windowsill, it's real pain. You're having to fill out the window. This is just that nice level of comfort. You can feel it. You can transition easily onto it. It doesn't block the window from getting victims out. It's just a little bit inside the window itself. If we're going to the roof with the ground ladder, 3 to 5 rungs above, again, the same thing. You can transition easily onto that roof ladder. Aerial ladder placement. Try to cut any vent holes from the tip of the aerial. If we can, when we're going to the roof, try to position it to the peak with enough room for your vent hole. If we're going on a flat roof, try to position the tip at the roof level or above that parapet enough that you can see it, and then easy enough to transition onto and off of the ladder. So again, this is where it's a major thing that we shouldn't just park our truck. We should position it for whatever our objectives are. When we're climbing with tools on the ladder, you know, we always are taught slide it up the beams of the ladder in your hand. Those hooks, you can reach up the higher rung, hook them in. You can climb up there right where you need them. The haligans, go ahead and put that pick right in the rung, the hole for the rung on the side of the ladder. It'll hold it right there versus trying to hook it on the rung on the inside and then bumping it and falling out. In the ventilation, ventilation is becoming more and more critical with the types of buildings we have. You know, more energy efficient. Everything's made of plastics, tremendous volumes of smoke and heat. So it's really critical that we know what we're doing. So we need to size up the building. We need to know why we're venting, what types of ventilation we're going to do, where we're going to vent, and some of the safety concerns. You know, for my size up, where's the fire located? Am I venting horizontally, taking the window, or am I going to the roof? What's the volume of smoke or fire coming from? What are the characteristics of the smoke? Is it heavy black smoke? Do we have concerns of flashover conditions? Do we have reports of victims trapped? Do I need to get in there and do a search? Do we have crews already inside ready to knock down the fire? Do I need to vent the window to go ahead and release some of the the trapped steam or some of the smoke. Why are we venting? Are we venting for fire? This is done to help extinguish the fire. It helps advance the engine company in. All the steam and smoke can be pushed right out ahead of them. Are we venting for life? It's allowing quick movement of members into the area to search. It's very calculated. Obviously, it can draw fire. The two major types of ventilations, horizontal and vertical. Obviously, we can assist any of these ventilations with fans or hydraulic means, any mechanical means that we want. The two main types are horizontal and vertical. Horizontal is opening windows to vent smoke. We take the windows probably on the fire floor. It should be coordinated with the fire attack. The last thing we want is going ahead and taking a window that we don't need to do. If you do that, you're causing more harm than good. It might draw the fire on top of them. It might cause flash to occur. So make sure it's a very coordinated attack. And then, are we going to vent horizontally? If we have a top floor fire, do I want to take the windows, or do I want to put somebody on the roof to vent the roof? Vertical ventilation, it can be opening up any openings on the roof, scuttles, bulkheads, skylights, cutting a hole in the roof. Again, it must be coordinated with the fire attack on the inside. I want to make sure that the crews inside know what I'm doing and they're ready for that vent hole to be open up. Getting to the roof safely. If possible, I want to use an aerial device. That's the safest means to get up there. Otherwise, a portable ladder, and then obviously on a pitched roof, trying to use a roof ladder up there. Can I get on from the adjacent exposure? If I can get up the stairs or up the fire escape, something with the adjacent exposure, great. Then I can transition over the firewall and onto the roof to make my cut. Or can I use the fire escape on the building? The big thing is don't use the interior stairs. If you do that, oftentimes those doors at the top are locked, and you're in a chimney now. You're trapped inside having to force your way out. So don't use the interior stairs. Roof safety size up. We get up top, we want to look for the presence of firewalls. If firewalls are in place, that probably means we don't have a common cock lock. That means that I have an adjacent exposure I could probably get off onto if I need to. It's a nice safety. Do I have any dead loads up there, HVAC systems, billboards, cell sites, anything like that, adding a tremendous amount of weight up there? Do I have any trapped occupants? I have a nice aerial view of everything that's going on. Do I have anybody that might have jumped, that might be missed on the ground? Somebody's in the bushes, something like that. I can see that up from the top. And then any conditions in the building. Oftentimes the incident commander can't see a full 360 of the building easily, especially in these larger buildings. Me from the roof, I can go to the back of the building and I can check the conditions in the rear for them. Moving safely around on the roof. Oftentimes on storefronts, they're flush on the front on the A side, and you go to the back of the building and they're all staggered. So in fire conditions, I always want to walk to the front of the building. If you walk in the rear and it's staggered, it's easy enough to walk right off the building. Also, if you can't see your feet when you're up there, you should be crawling on the roof. Watch out for any openings that might have been tarred over, any bulkheads, any skylights, anything like that, any light shafts that might just be tarred over. So try to walk around and sound the roof as you go. Make sure you're always bringing tools with you, everything that you need to get up there. Make sure you have an axe. The axe always starts, as one of my friends, Pat Nichols from Boston, says. Saw might not start, the axe always starts. Have a hook to be able to push the ceiling down or pull the roofing materials open. A Halligan's a great place to drive in, a great tool to drive into the roofing material, and it's a good foothold for you as you transition. And then obviously a thermal imaging camera, if you can, lets you know where you need to open up. Make sure you're not going to the roof ill-equipped. The last thing you want to do is get up there and realize that you forgot something and have to come down or have to have somebody else come up. Stage your tools to the tip of the aerial if possible. Where am I going to cut? Look for melting snow, melting tar, any steam off the roof, smoke seeping out, fire conditions, and obviously using your thermal imaging. Anything like that may indicate a great place where you need to cut the roof. Where to cut from? If possible, I talked about cutting from the tip of the aerial. It's especially important with these lightweight buildings we have now. Work from the aerial. Practice cutting from the aerial if possible. Always do that. If you can't get the aerial up, it won't reach. You might be able to put the aerial to a roof ladder or a ground ladder to a roof ladder, but always work off some sort of platform when you're up there, especially on a pitched roof. Flat roof, make sure that you're going ahead and sounding the roof, trying to spread your weight out as much as possible. Sound that roof as you go. When we cut a residential roof, we want to make a good 4x4 cut if possible. I always say the bigger the better. Sheets of plywood and OSB comes in 4x8 sheets. So go ahead and make a big cut. Once that cut's made, make sure you coordinate with the interior teams and push that ceiling down. Just because you have that opened up doesn't mean it's vented. You're just venting the smoke in that attic space or the tackle space. Make sure you push down to allow the smoke to escape from the crews operating below. For whatever reason, conditions are bad, you need to make a quick cut. If you look at that cut in the left picture, the second one down from the top, it's a basket cut. Do a top cut, and we do a big rounded belly on that cut, and then a cut down. So now we're using 3 cuts. But anytime we're doing that, with any cut, we need to make sure we're crossing a cut so we're not fighting it later on. Cutting a commercial roof. We have to peel up all the layered material on top and then cut the corrugated metal underneath. So don't expect to cut this roof quickly. Always look for other options if possible. We want to look for other vertical openings, any skylights that we might have, any bulkheads we might have, any scuttles, anything like that. Make sure we're opening those up first. Don't forget to check for the presence of a draft stop, especially on those skylights. You might hit that, nothing's coming out. You might have to go down a little bit. Energy efficiency, they're trying to keep the heat down on the people. They might put something down a little lower, so always check for that. The don'ts of vertical ventilation. Don't forget to sound the roof. Always sound the roof with the tool as you're going up. Don't forget to cross your cuts. Again, you're going to be fighting them if you don't. Don't forget to push the ceiling down after the cut. That's a big thing that people forget oftentimes. And then don't stay in the roof after the vent is completed. Get off the roof as soon as you know you have your vent done. The final area we'll talk about is overhauling. Obviously, there's nothing more embarrassing than getting called back later on some night because the fire got bigger. You didn't have the fire out all the way. So we need to make sure the fire is properly extinguished. We're going to talk about where to open up using thermal imaging cameras, how to open up walls and ceilings. The areas we want to open up, the areas obviously right around the fire area, the areas above the fire, might have transitioned through balloon frame construction up to upper floors, any pipe chases. Even though we might have a platform style construction, we have holes drilled in there, big holes for plumbing and stuff, something might be transitioning through there. It's not fire stopped like it's supposed to be. Inspection holes. We don't have to make a huge hole. If possible, scan the room with the thermal imaging camera. And if need be, put the inspection hole in, look for any conditions there. So we do that. I oftentimes like to put it in the corner of a room if I have balloon frame construction, the far corner towards an outside wall. That's the best place where something's going to be visible if it transitioned up from the outside. So go ahead and put an inspection hole in the wall or ceiling, just a small hole. If you make a huge hole, we have heavy fire conditions, we have trouble. Baseboards. If you just go ahead and pry the baseboard off just a little bit, there might be a gap between the flooring and the wall material that might have smoke or something coming out. It's a great way to check real quick if we have any fire extension or staining right there. Using the thermal imaging camera. Just because something shows white doesn't mean that there's fire back there. Using that camera on the inspection hole, looking for any convected currents that are coming out of there. Go ahead and check there real quick. Check the wall. If something shows up white, put your hand up there. See if your hand's hotter than the object in the wall, or whiter than the object in the wall. If it's significantly warmer, your hand's significantly warmer, there's a good chance it's just a little bit of heat back there. If you have any concerns, remember to open up the material. Don't just rely on the camera. They're great tools, but use your common sense. Opening up ceilings. We'll start with that inspection hole, and I go ahead and put the tool up there. I start pulling back towards the door. Anytime we're doing that, try to work towards the trusses or the rafters up there, pulling back. Plaster and lat, if you pull in the middle, it snaps. It still stays attached on the sides. It's just a big issue. So make sure you're pulling right along that truss or rafter right back to the door. Opening up walls. We'll start again with that inspection hole. I put the tool in. I've got that baseboard pried back. I check that. I drop my tool in that inspection hole now, plaster and lat. Drop it in. You pull back. You clear that entire bay, maybe a couple bays really easily versus sitting there trying to pull it open with tools. So make sure that you open it up effectively. Work smarter, not harder. And then any tools that we're not using should be placed out of the way. Take them, put them in the wall. Drive the hook or the halligan in the wall, hang it up there. It's easy enough for them to be covered by materials that you're pulling down It lets you know where they are if you need to use them. You can grab them. Other people aren't tripping all over them. So remember, all the tasks we talked about today have to be carried out in some form at a fire. Just because you don't have a truck company doesn't mean you're not doing truck company tasks. So make sure you're becoming proficient at all aspects of the job. So that concludes it for me. I'd like to thank Firehouse.com, specifically Peter Matthews, for allowing me to do this, Scott Safety for being a great sponsor and allowing me this opportunity. In addition, I'd like to thank some personal thanks to the St. Paul Fire Department, Chief Butler, Assistant Chief Smith for allowing me to do this, the training division where I'm currently detailed to, Chief McDonough, Ken Gilliam, Joe Blank, Andy Beasy, all the members of Station 8 on the A shift, my previous fire department, all the people that I learned from in the past, Township Fire Department in Eau Claire, and then two good friends of mine that were great mentors for the truck company stuff, Lieutenant Mark Gregory from the New York City Fire Department and Captain Pat Nichols from Boston Fire Department. In addition, a good friend of mine and a mentor, Chief John Neihart, retired from the Chippewa Fire District in Wisconsin. And then last but not least, my girlfriend, Jen Elmore, for putting up with me while I'm doing all this stuff for Firehouse. So thanks again for the great opportunity, and thanks for listening in.
John, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody for joining us. We will get to questions in just a moment. Just want to let everybody know that if you came into the program late because you were on a run, or if folks had to leave early, you can let them know that just about this time tomorrow, the archive will be available at firehouse.com/webcasts, and there's a series of other webcasts available there as well. So you can sit down and watch us at your own time at firehouse.com/webcasts. Again, would like to thank Scott Safety for sponsoring this webcast. This is the second one they've sponsored with us this year. When it comes to RIT operations, every second counts. That's why Scott worked closely with the top RIT trainers from across the country to design the RIT Pack 3, the most comprehensive portable air supply system on the market. The RIT Pack 3 is a true mutual aid tool that is compatible with any brand of SCBA. Scott would like to thank you for participating in today's training session. Firefighter safety starts with the proper training and education, and that is why Scott Safety continues to support world-class training activities from around the world, including today's webinar. We encourage you to join Scott Safety on Facebook, and their address is facebook.com/Scott Safety for the latest update on Scott events and to provide your input into the conversation. John, we received a bunch of questions, so we'll start getting through them now. The first one here comes from Dan. It says, in regards to room searches, what is your thoughts on thermal imaging searches? Crew leader outside of the room scans with the thermal imaging camera, then sends another crew into the room while remaining at the door. Room size depending, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing. I talked about a little bit earlier on having the orientation person in the hallway or at the door. Oftentimes, as a company officer, it's great to have them with a camera, especially if you're in a hallway apartment or something like that, having somebody searching the bedrooms off the side of the hallway as you're going down. Obviously, smaller rooms are the great thing to use it for. Don't just rely on the thermal imaging camera. Make sure you're able to communicate with them in some fashion, either visual or voice. If it's a large room, I'm not a big fan of having somebody just stay at the door and orientate somebody with the camera itself. A smaller room, it works great to do that. You can search two rooms just as quick with the amount of people that you have on the inside.
Okay, great. Jim asks here, again related to thermal imaging cameras. When vertically venting large buildings, have you ever considered utilizing a thermal imager to help locate where to make the cut?
Yep, I talked about that a little bit on one of the slides. You have all those things you can use, roof tar, fire conditions, smoke conditions, and the thermal imaging camera. Thermal imaging cameras are great. It usually lets you know the area where the fire is. Sometimes they don't work as well, depending on the amount of insulation and stuff that you have up there on a nice flat roof or something, or if you have an attic space, you might not be able to see the exact spot you need to, but obviously use that as a tool to help you locate where you need to make the panel.
Okay, next question comes in. It says, what search do you recommend if walls are not accessible, perhaps, or like excess contents, prohibiting access to the walls? So you're looking at a hoarding or Collier's mansion.
And I kind of talked about that also a little bit too. As far as searches go, obviously try to have your hand on the wall if you can't. Large area searches or maze-like conditions, cubicles divided up, and I think I even mentioned the hoarding conditions. Having some sort of search scope is a great way to ensure that you're able to get back out to the outside of the building. It's your safety guide on the way out. Depending on the hoarding conditions, it might be tough because you might have mounds of debris all over. It's tough to transition and to effectively search that area. So your searches might be delayed simply because of the conditions you have on the inside.
Okay, next question. Positive pressure ventilation versus vertical ventilation. What are your thoughts?
Positive pressure has its place. It's one of those things that, again, with any ventilation, you have to really ensure that it's coordinated. We don't want to be putting positive pressure in on certain fire conditions without having control of the fire. At least I'm not a big fan of that. Obviously, we can't do vertical ventilation at every fire. If the fire is on the first floor and it's a 2.5-story, I'm probably not going to put somebody on the roof. But horizontal, coupled with some the fans there, work great. It's a little concerning with basement fires or any hidden fires that you might have. It could obviously cause a little bit of spread. Make sure that you have crews ready to go. We've had conditions in basement fires where fans are put blowing in, crews down there, and crews are getting cooked in the basement. So always size up your ventilation and always coordinate it with the crews inside.
Okay, and again, I think a lot of that comes back to the size up and knowing your buildings, correct, as far as...
Absolutely, yep.
Okay. Okay, the next question here is on solar panels. I don't think we did touch on this. It seems that I wasn't paying attention as I go through some of the questions here, but I was. And this comes from California. It says solar panels. Would you ever mess with these if they cover the entire roof and you need to have vertical ventilation?
Personally, if I had a situation where the entire roof was covered in solar panels, it's one of those things that it's really tough to work on. Obviously, it's very slick. You'd have to be working from the tip of the aerial, but it's a lot of work. It's very manpower intensive, just like cutting a commercial roof. So I would try to find other means to vent that building if possible. Usually there's some ways of venting the roof. If it's a commercial building and it's covered with it, there might be a skylight or something up there to provide light conditions on the inside. Try taking one of those first. A residential home, usually you have some other means of venting it. You might have to go ahead to go to the edge of the building, the side of the building, and cut a hole or something to vent. But I would try to stay away from the solar panels if possible.
And as far as that, I mean, how would you, if you have a couple of skylights or scuttles in the center, would you throw a ground ladder down to traverse the solar the panels, or?
Yeah, I mean, if it's possible, have something to spread your weight out. A lot of them are fairly tough, especially if it's lining the entire roof, because they have to be able to take some of the abuse up there. I haven't had a lot of experience with solar panels in the city of St. Paul. We don't have too many of them. Usually they're small, just small cells of them, small pods of them. So it's kind of one of those things. Try to find other ways to vent the roof if possible, or to vent the building if possible.
Okay. Next question comes from Joseph. It says, when opening a wall for possible fire, what part of the wall should a firefighter make that first opening in? If the opening is not high enough, is there a potential for a backdraft?
Typically, when you're opening up a wall, I'm assuming this is for overhaul conditions on the inside. At that point, we're not so concerned about backdraft. We usually have other ventilation that's occurring. You might have some hidden fire back there. It's always a concern, half-story homes with knee walls that you have something come out at you. So that's why we always start with that small inspection hole. If I make that small inspection hole and I have heavy fire conditions like a blowtorch coming out, then obviously I'm a little bit concerned. I want to make sure that I have, adequate hand lines out there to open it up. But I usually start by prying that baseboard back, small inspection hole midway up the wall, and then one up on the ceiling level, looking again for any convective currents with my camera, any fire coming out, and then I'd open it up.
Okay. John, the last question today. It says, my ladder is staffed by 2, and the engine usually handles forcible entry. We had a fire on the second floor of a 2.5 or 2.5-story home, and we had to handle search and rescue and ventilation. How important is vertical ventilation, or is horizontal ventilation enough?
Well, it all depends on where your fire conditions are. If you're up in that half story, are you going to be able to adequately ventilate that half story if it's an occupied half story? By taking the windows, you might be. I'd focus in on, maybe having your engine companies do the searches, but, try to get those searches done. Life safety is the first and foremost priority. If we can vent horizontally and that's adequate, certainly try that, coordinate it with the engine company. If that's adequate, great. If not, then we might have to consider transitioning up to the roof. But you coordinate those things, can coordinate it with your crews inside, let them, tell me if the conditions are improving if I take the windows. If not, we might have to then transition to the roof. If that's the case, maybe have your engine company try to do the search as they're going on the scene of the fire, or your second engine company do that.
All right, perfect. Well, John, thank you again for sharing everything that you did with us today. We appreciate you taking the time to put this together. Again, a big thank you to Scott Safety for sponsoring this. You can learn more about Scott on their Facebook page. That's facebook.com/ScottSafety. And again, firehouse.com/webcast. So you can find this one archived tomorrow. Please pass this along to the crews that may have been off today, or the folks who may be coming in this evening or next week if they're on vacation. Want to make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to the training. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon here on Firehouse.com webcasts.
This concludes our conference call for today. You may now disconnect your line.